Welcome to Digital Literacy, a guide to using technology and journalism. This week we're going to start our first of 4 weeks looking at video and video journalism, particularly video journalism for online audiences. It's a little different from broadcast, but it's a little simpler than dealing with broadcast is as well. So our goals for this week, we're going to talk about the tools. The tool that you're going to use is a Kodak ZI-8 camera. It's a very simple, straightforward video camera and still camera. You've already got a little experience with it. It's the same camera you used to do your photo shoots a little while ago. We're going to teach you how to shoot with it. We've got some tips, some techniques, some tricks, some things that are going to make your life a little bit easier as you're going along. And then we're going to talk about what to shoot. What to shoot is really important because if you don't come back with all of the pieces that you really need, you're going to have an awful lot of problems. But first, let's take a look at the camera. All right, we're going to take a few moments to go over the camera again. Now, we took a look at the camera when we were doing the photo section a few weeks ago, but we're going to go back over it because there's a couple of other things that are included in your kit that we want to bring your attention to. So very quickly, we've got a small tripod here. This is called a GorillaPod, and it's pretty nice. Move it out. You can actually bend these around quite a bit, so you could even wrap this around some things. One thing that you do want to note that to attach it, it's kind of funny, along the side here there's a little switch. It's got a lock and an unlock mode, and what that means is you got to put it in unlock, and then this will slide out with a little push of the button up here. This will slide out, and then you can attach this to the bottom of the camera, and you'll just need your finger or a coin or something like that to spin that on, and then slide that back into place. You'll hear it click, and then throw it back on the lock. So that's the tripod, real simple there. We've also got a little lavalier microphone. Now the camera has a built-in microphone that's good for general purpose stuff, but for when you do interviews, you really want to be using this lav, and you're going to find it in 2 or 3 pieces in there. It doesn't mean that it's broken, it just means that somebody has taken it apart. The first part is the microphone itself, which looks like this. And it's just a simple little Olympus microphone. This is about a $16 kit for the mic. There is going to be a little foam cap that goes over it, and this is just to cut down on wind noise. Now this will plug into this short cable here, and this cable is almost the perfect length to be able to do an interview from. So this end is going to go into the side of the camera. This end here you can plug your microphone into, and then you can swivel this around and you can clip this onto somebody's shirt lapel or something like that and get that pointed up at them. Right? And then this plugs into the side of the camera here where there's a microphone jack. So let's go over the camera again real quick. On the right hand side is power button. I'm going to get that powered up. And then I'm going to put this down here and we're going to zoom in on it so that it's a little easier to see what we're doing on the controls. Very fancy we are here. Okay, so it's not seeing anything, but right now we're in the 720p mode. We're in the macro mode, and secure digital card is in there, and our battery is in pretty good shape. So the first thing I want to do is take it out of that macro mode. And again, there's a switch up on the top side here to be able to do that. To switch the different camera formats, hit the camera button here, and then just use the left and right switch to move between them. Between 1080p, 720p at a very, very high frame rate. This would be good if you're doing sports. 720p, which is where we want to be, because that's going to give us a good compromise between image quality and file size. And then there's also your standard definition of 640 by 480, which is WVGA, and then the still photo mode over there on the right hand side. So we're in that 720p mode right now. So let's come over to settings and let's take a look at a couple of things. We have the option to go in there and adjust the date on it. We don't need to worry about that. The format, NTSC, is the standard for North America. There's also a PAL option if you go to Europe. You can adjust the brightness and darkness of the screen itself. This is for the speaker when you're listening back. And then this is kind of cool. This allows you to adjust the audio level on the microphone. So if you're in a very, very loud situation, you can go ahead and turn down the microphone, and that will allow you not to over-deviate your audio. For the most part, leave it just a little to the right of top dead center, and you should be fine. This is how you can turn on your image, electronic image stabilization here. We want to leave that on all the time. There's almost no reason not to have it on this camera. This is a face detection mode. This is for reformatting your card. You would come in, click format, and then check yes if that's what you really wanted to do. I'm not sure I want to do that right now. And then this gives you some information on how much space and how much time you can shoot video for. All right, so that's the basics of the camera here again. Remember, on the right-hand side, you've got the ability to take out your secure digital card. You can pop this open, plug this in. You want to put your name on your secure digital card. Hopefully you did that earlier in the semester, so just in case they get mixed up with somebody else, you're set to go. As far as holding this, it's pretty straightforward. All you're going to do is hold it here, point it at something, turn the settings off. And you're not seeing a whole lot there. There we go. You can see something. Let's put something of interest down in here. And then to record, just push the red button. You'll see a red button in the upper left-hand corner. It's also giving you the amount of time for this shot. Remember, you want every shot to last at least 10 seconds. If you have less than 10 seconds, you're going to have a hard time editing that. And you want to hold this as steady as possible. One of the reasons that you really want to use that tripod as much as you possibly can. We have to deal with a couple of technical things right away now. The first of which is something called codecs, C-O-D-E-C-S. Codecs are the file formats that video cameras produce, and there are literally hundreds of them. If you launch Final Cut Pro and go looking at the different file formats that you can deal with, it's just a never-ending list, and it can kind of make you sick to your stomach. But there's just a couple of them that we're going to worry about. The first is something called H.264, and the reason we're going to worry about this is the format that our camera is going to produce files in. Now, H.264 is going to come up again here in a couple of minutes because we see it in a lot of different places. But H.264 is a great shooting codec. It's also a great output codec. Unfortunately, it's a really terrible editing codec. Video editors have a very, very hard time dealing with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a program called MPEG Streamclip, and we're going to use that to convert our files into something called the Apple Intermediate Codec. So it's an extra step between when we shoot and before we can get to editing, but it's going to simplify our lives quite a bit. And then once we're done with our editing product and we're going to go output it and get it ready for posting on the web, oddly enough, we're going to stick it back into H.264 file format at the very end of this 4-week sequence when we start dealing with the compressor program. Now, MPEG Streamclip is a really great program. It's available for both Macs and PCs, and it's one of my all-time favorite prices when it comes to software. It's free. I do not understand how the company does this, but they do it. We have it installed on all of our machines. You can go ahead and install it on your own machines if you're going to do some video editing. What it does is you can drag a bunch of files into it, tell it what kind of output you want, click output, and off it goes. It starts exporting that file into whatever format it is that you need it for. And again, it can export your files into dozens, if not hundreds, of different file formats. The next bit of technical mumbo jumbo we need to deal with is resolution, because the camera that you're shooting with, as we noted earlier, shoots in a couple of different resolutions. Now, the most common one that everybody talks about is 1080p, or 1080 progressive. This is a very high definition video file, and if you're buying a TV, you probably want to buy a 1080p television because it's the highest quality that you can get right now. Now, on television, that's great, but on the web, the world works very, very differently. A 1080p produced file is going to be huge. It's going to take a ton of bandwidth to download it. It's going to take a ton of storage space to store it online. So what we're going to recommend doing is we're actually going to step down one level to something called 720p. Now that 720 or 1080 are the vertical lines of resolution. So instead of having 1080 vertical lines, we're going to deal with 720 vertical lines. This is still technically a high definition file. The difference between 1080p and 720p when you upload it onto a video hosting service like YouTube or Vimeo or Blip, you're not going to see the difference between these. If you're burning Blu-ray DVDs and showing them on a really, really big television, you might see the file difference between them. But for online usage, you're not going to see it, and the advantages are huge in having that smaller file size. So let's talk a little bit about the philosophy behind shooting. And the first thing that you need to think about is that still photos are shot from the heart. Still photos are all about moments. They're about individual moments that advance a story. Video is completely different. Video is shot from the head. Because you're going to be sequencing together multiple shots and syncing it with audio, you have to think way ahead. You have to think about your final product constantly as you're shooting. Because if you go into the editing booth, if you sit down at your machine to start editing and you don't have the footage that you need from the field, your life is going to be very difficult. So video is all about planning ahead. It's about thinking, what elements do I need to have? And those elements, the most important one is audio. Audio drives everything. It's just like audio slideshows. When you start editing, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to put down your audio tracks, because that's the most important piece there. You have to have good audio. You have to have good interview questions. It's got to be clean. You got to be thinking about audio all the time. Now, when it comes to the visuals that go along with this, similar to photo, we're going to talk about 3 different things. We're going to talk about long shots, those establishing shots like this one from the recent summer graduation here at UGA. Long shots give you a sense of space, a sense of scale. Sometimes they give you a sense of location as well. The next thing that you're going to be worrying about are medium shots. Medium shots, we're moving in a little bit closer. Your interviews are primarily going to be medium shots, similar to this shot here that we're going to be demonstrating with in the next couple of weeks of Cecil Bentley, the Career Services Advisor for Grady College. The last element that you're going to be looking for are close-up shots, detail shots, like this program from the summer graduation, or even these shoes just moving along, these feet walking along. Those detail shots, the close-up shots, really advance the story. They fill in blanks. They let the viewer see something that only you would see. Now, when it comes to shooting video, one of the things you have to do is you have to make sure you shoot enough. So on every single shot, every time you press the record button on your recorder, you want to make sure that it runs for a minimum of 10 seconds. And there's a lot of reasons for this. The average clip that you're going to use is probably only 5 or 6 seconds. Sometimes they'll run longer depending on what's going on. But if you have at least 10 seconds, that's going to allow you to trim off a little at the beginning and a little at the end, where maybe the camera's moving a little bit as you hit the button and then start moving your fingers around to stop your recording. But again, always look for a minimum of 10 seconds. Now, motion in video is a very difficult thing to deal with. So we've got a basic philosophy here. No pans, no zooms. Panning the camera from side to side or moving it around or zooming in and out, it's going to make it very, very difficult for the viewer to understand what's going on because you can't do it really smoothly. The pans and zooms that you see in movies and television are done with very, very expensive rigs. And they actually have people whose sole job is to be a zoom puller or a focus puller. And that's the only thing that they do is adjust the focus and the zooms. They also have very elaborate mechanical systems for panning cameras and moving cameras around. The most important thing for us to do is to get steady shots all the time. To help with that, you want to make sure that you use the tripod as much as you possibly can. Now, the camera has an electronic image stabilization mode built into it. We're going to leave that on all the time, but we've also given you a small tripod. So whenever you're doing an interview, if you can, put that tripod down on a table in front of your subject, point the camera at your subject, and go. The less motion you have, the easier it is for your viewers to understand what's going on. Also helps cut down on some of the motion sickness. When we get to the editing process, the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to lay down your audio. You're going to go through your interview and you're going to cut out and put into what's called the timeline, and we'll explain all of this in another week or two. You're going to put into the timeline your audio interview. That's the first thing that you're going to do. You're going to take the pieces, put them in the order that makes the most sense so that you can just close your eyes and listen to it and it's going to sound like a radio report. After you've got your audio all established, then you go in and you put in what's called B-roll. Now, this is the cover shots sometimes. They're called that. And this is the video clips that maybe you're not going to use the sound from, but you just need the visual. So if you have somebody sitting and talking about a program, then you show the clips of the program itself while you're still hearing their voice. It's a very basic, straightforward sort of a package that you've got in here. Two other things that we'll talk about here. The first is matched action. The idea with matched action is that you shoot some sort of a repetitive action from multiple angles. And what this allows you to do is edit them together so it looks like you had two cameras at the scene shooting at the same time. Couple of tips here. The first is you don't want to be shooting both of those shots from the same angle. So if you're shooting sort of a medium shot of somebody and then you decide that the second part of the matched action is going to be a close-up, in addition to moving in closer physically, remember we don't want to use the zoom, you're also going to want to change your shooting angle by at least 30 degrees. Otherwise it ends up looking like a jump cut where somebody is in one position and then in the very next frame they're suddenly very close or very far away and it looks like the camera has jumped. Now we also use the phrase jump cuts in a different way, and that is when you have somebody in one location doing one thing and then in the very next frame they're in a different location doing something completely different and it looks like they've been teleported from one scene to the next. So that's something that we really, really want to avoid having in here. All right, your vocab for this week. H.264. This is the first one. This is that codec that our camera is going to produce. You want to make sure that you understand the word codecs and the fact that there are lots and lots of different codecs out there, different file formats for video. Right? The 10-second rule, how long are you going to keep your shots for? 1080p, that high definition, very large file size, versus 720p, the smaller file size that's going to work great on the web. Jump cuts. You want to make sure you understand what a jump cut is. And just to reiterate, a jump cut can come from two different things. One is two shots of the same subject from essentially the same angle but from different magnifications, so one close, one far away, or when your subject is in one place doing one thing, and then in the very next sequence, the next shot, they're in a different place doing something completely different with no time in between to be able to have them move. Now, one of the things that you can do is you can use some B-roll to cover it up. If you put some sort of a transition in between the two of them, if you move the camera away from the subject and then put the camera back on the subject, that gives them time to move from one place to another. Matched action. This is when you simulate having two cameras pointed at your subject and rolling at the same time by shooting some sort of a repetitive action and then editing in such a way that it looks like one continuous action just shot, again, from two different angles. B-roll. B-roll is unbelievably important. There's a common phrase in the video world that says, as soon as you think you shot enough B-roll, go shoot more. You can never have enough of these cover shots. It's unbelievably important to have a lot of B-roll. All right, so your assignment for this week is going to be to shoot an interview with a classmate. What we're going to do is have you go out with the cameras, use the microphones, clip them on there, ask them sequence questions, similar to the way you did your audio interview for your audio slideshows earlier this semester. Then we want you to shoot some more video. We want you to shoot a scene set or a long shot. Give us a sense of place. Give us a sense of whatever building you're in or whatever space you're in. Now, when you're doing your interview, one thing to think about is you want to make sure that you're in a very, very quiet location. Right? After you get your scene setter, look for 3 to 5 detail shots. Maybe it's them writing something down, typing in a keyboard, looking at their watch, typing in a text message on their cell phone, anything, some other things that you can use for B-roll. You should also shoot for a matched action. So after you're done with this, come back into the lab and have them start typing. Maybe you shoot them while they're downloading their cards, and then they shoot you while you're downloading your cards. Shoot it from a couple of different angles so you can try and sequence this stuff together. All right? Now, you're going to want to make sure that you're using your card, the one that's been issued to you. And because we're not going to have time at the end of class today, you want to take it with you. Make sure that you take your card out of the camera, put it in your pocket, put it in your bag, and keep it with you for next week. All right, so that wraps up this week. Good luck with your shooting. Your professors will be around. They should be able to answer any questions that you do have about this. Next week when you come in, we're going to walk through the download, conversion, and start the editing process. So you should be looking forward to that. This series was produced for the Journalism Department of the Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Georgia by a grant from the James M. Cox Institute for Newspaper Management Studies.